For this video, we'll be learning about the different ways and strategies that can be used to create matchups in TheOneDB. The demos shown will start with our sample season structure created and the teams assigned to their respective rounds. To learn how to create this seasonal structure, please refer to our other training video on that subject. First, a quick definition of the word matchup. It's basically a game that hasn't had a date, time, or venue assigned to it yet. But it's also the way for a league to declare how many games each team should be playing, and for each of those games, which team is declared the home team. Schedules cannot be created without the matchups being defined first. The first method for creating matchups is the newest option available and will likely be the preferred option for nearly every regular season round, as most leagues will play a target number of games in a season, regardless of how many teams are participating within the group. Even if the number of games played does change based on how many teams there are, in order to try to create a balanced schedule, this is still likely the method you'll use to create those loops, since it will automatically create game numbers that suggest a sequence of games to be played in order to spread out the opponents for each team. Let's take a look at a demo of this method in action. To showcase the method of creating matchups where we're specifying how many games each team is going to play, we'll go to the Season Matchups page. And this page allows us to choose which round we're working with. We're going to stick with the under 11 AAA regular season in our demo sample season that we've got set up. This round has 8 teams in it, and it has a date range of September 22nd to February 4th, which after taking out the Christmas holidays is approximately 19 weeks. So perhaps a reasonable target for games to be played is 24. So we're going to go to Create Matchups, create total matchups per team, and 24 as our target. Creating those matchups will then add 12 home and 12 away matchups for every single team. And because there are 8 teams in the round, that means each team is going to play 3 games against every other team for their first 21. And then the schedule generator will automatically add 3 additional games against random opponents. In doing so, it made sure that every single team had at least 1 home game against every other team. And in the cases where there are the additional games, so they play 4 total games, there's 2 home and 2 away in each one of those cases. In addition, it's created game numbers for each of these matchups, where it starts with the letter G, followed by 2 digits, a dash, and an extra digit at the end. The first 2 digits after the G actually represent what we call the week number. Now, because this is 24 games in 19 weeks, this is not a full week, it's just slightly less than a 7-day period. But it still is the basic order in which these games should be played. And then the second digit, or the last digit at the end, is the order within the week that game would be played in an ideal circumstance. The next method of creating matchups uses the concept of round-robin loops to generate a home and away game versus every other team in the round. It allows for single, double, triple, or really any number of home and away loops to be created. Let's take a look at this in action. To demonstrate the loops method of creating matchups, we're actually going to use a round that has multiple divisions to start with. So in our 24-25 season for the U11s, we have our East and our West division with 4 teams each. And let's just say we're going to create matchups for this, and we're going to use the create multiple home matchups option. And what triggers the loop is this checkbox to repeat for all teams in the division. In this case, now we're going to say that we want to do a double home and away against teams in our own division. And we want to play 1 home game against all the teams in the other division. So go ahead and create those matchups. And for the West division, we'll go ahead and do the same thing. Create multiple matchups, repeat for all, 2 home matchups, plus 1 in the other division, and create those matchups. So this now has given us a 20-game schedule for those teams. We're 10 home and 10 away games. The first 12 games in the schedule are against teams in their own division, and the last 8 are against teams in the other division. For a simpler version, let's go look at the 23-24 U13 regular season, which has 7 teams in it, but no divisions. Or 8 teams, sorry, with no divisions. We can do the same thing. We're going to create matchups. We're going to create multiple home matchups. Tell it to repeat for all teams in the division. And in this case, we're going to do a double home and away, which will generate 14 home and 14 away games per team, so a 28-game schedule. Now from here, we can go and delete matchups out of it if we need to back that off down to a 24-game schedule like we did for the U11s. But if we're going to go ahead and play a 28-game schedule, which might be feasible in this case, we can just leave that as is. And again, this just shows in the matrix down below that every single team is playing every other team 4 times, where 2 of those games are home games and 2 of those games are away games. The third method of creating matchups is to basically add them one at a time. Now, very rarely would you ever build an entire schedule one at a time, but there actually are situations where this might be useful. For example, if a team changes their group at some point during the season after the schedule's been released and gets put into a new round, you're likely going to have to add those games individually to make sure that you're balancing out the remaining schedules of all the other teams that are that started in that round. So let's take a look at this in action. To showcase this, we're going to look at the under 15 AAA regular season, and we're going to cheat here to get started. Let's say we want to play 24 total games, but in this particular one, we're going to create our matchups, and instead of telling it to create 24, we're going to tell it to create 21. So we'll go ahead and create those matchups, and now we've got a 21 game schedule. The reason we did 21 instead of 24 is we wanted to make sure that every team plays every other team 3 times. Now, when we scheduled 24 games, we using the number of games per team method, what the system does is just randomly choose the opponent to play those extra 3 games against, and it will always make sure to put 2 home and 2 away games in the situations where teams have 4 games. But let's say that for whatever reason, maybe due to travel or other factors, that we want to actually add a 3rd home game for these teams when they're playing against various opponents. So to do this, we can look at the Demo 1 Bobcats, or this team here. The home team listed across the top will show you in the games in red where they're already hosting 2 games against another team. So Demo 1 team is hosting the Demo 3 team already twice. So if we want to start adding the additional 3 games manually, we can go, first we choose the Demo 1 team at the top, create matchups, and then choose create single matchup, and we'll say we want to host the Demo 3 team again and create that matchup. So as we're building this up, it's automatically adding to our totals here. So we've got 22 games for this team now, 11 home and 11 away, and it's showing that there's this matchup now scheduled. We didn't give it a game number. It just shows that there's 3 against that particular team. So we can follow that through with the 7 and Team 8 team to give them additional home or away games based on whether or not they've got 10 or 11 to start with, and go through it and continue that on. So this is a little bit trickier. Sometimes it involves writing it down on paper before you do it in the system, but this matrix down below will also help you keep track of what teams are playing however many games against the various opponents, and going through and adding the rest of those games individually. The last method for creating matchups is going to be the importing method, which really isn't importing, but actually using the bulk matchup commands page to issue commands. These matchups can be created in Excel, saved as a CSV file, and then opened in Notepad to copy and paste the script onto the page. So let's take a look at what that looks like. To showcase the importing method, we're going to start with Excel, showing our matchups generated in this particular file. Now, while technically Excel isn't required, it is usually the easiest way to get these matchups all set up. So the file has 1 matchup per line, has 4 columns in it, where the first column is the command, which is always going to be the word matchup. Then we have the game number, which needs to be unique for each of these matchups, the name of the home team, and the name of the away team. So to use the bulk matchups commands page, what we need to do is actually save this file and then open it in Notepad. So we're going to open with and choose Notepad as our option here. And the headings don't really matter for the Excel file, but because what we actually want is everything down below that heading. So we can take that and copy it and return back to TheOneDB, and instead of using the create matchups, we're going to go down below the matrix and do the bulk matchup commands option. Now on here, it will tell us that the bulk matchup commands page actually has a number of different things it can do. It can create your matchups, it can schedule your games, and it can even add scores to the games inside the round. For this one, we're going to go ahead and use the CSV command data to paste in our information from our CSV file and submit those commands to the site. Now, there's also instructions down below about how to use each of these, but we've already read those, so we're going to go ahead and submit our commands. So this will go through and basically put into the rounds matchups whatever was in that file. If there are any issues, it would spit out a new file showing what those issues were and give you the opportunity to fix it and come back and resubmit it. So one final thing we'll mention in this video is the way in which you can assign game numbers to the matchups. So depending on the method that you've used, the game numbers may already be there, but we're going to show the bulk game number tool that's inside the TheOneDB just to give you an idea of the options that are available with that. So looking at the under 13 regular season that we created using the loops method, which did not automatically assign game numbers when those matchups were created. We can see all these matchups have blanks in those boxes next to the opponent, and down below it just says the word matchup. So that's how we know that there are no game numbers assigned to them. Once matchups are created, then beside the game matchups buttons, there are options for deleting matchups or going in and using the bulk game numbers option. And typically what you're going to do when you're using game numbers is to give it a prefix that corresponds to the group that the round belongs to. So in this case, U13, AAA, dash, and then that will prefix all the game numbers with U13 AAA dash, and then it's going to have the starting number of 1, incrementing by 1, and with three characters for each game number, which means basically for game number 1, it will be 001, game 2 will be 002, and so on. So by providing all those game numbers and then going down to the bottom, hit save, this will then update our matchup list to include those game numbers in the boxes, as well as show the game numbers themselves in each of the games in the matrix. Now, for the divisions that we used our schedule generator to specify the number of games, and it gave us the sequence. You can renumber those game numbers at any time. However, what we would recommend is that you wait until after the games are scheduled. This page will list these games in order of the previous game number, or in order of opponent if there are no game numbers. Or if they are scheduled, it will list the games chronologically, which means that you can come in here and say that we're going to go after the games are scheduled and do U11 AAA dash and then 0, 1 up through however many games are in this round. And that will create the game numbers which are now in sequence of the date and time that they're going to be played whenever you create your game numbers. Which means that if, for whatever reason, a game schedule does change down the road, you'll be able to identify those games fairly easily because they'll be out of sequence with respect to the game numbers. So just something to think about with the game numbers in general. We do recommend that game numbers are specified for all your games, that they also include a prefix that allows you to know what group and round that game belongs to just by the prefix, and that they are numbered sequentially, chronologically after the schedule is put together.